She was the richest woman alive, yet in her final years, Liliane Bettencourt gave away over $1 billion to a photographer she barely knew. This isn't what you'll find in glossy magazines. It's what nobody tells you about power, loneliness, and how one promise of freedom changed everything. Liliane Bettencourt entered the world in Paris in 1922, the only child of Eugene Schuller, the chemist who founded L'Oréal. From the start, her life was shaped by privilege and loss. Her mother, a pianist, died when Liliane was just 5. The mansion on Rue de la Bauderie would later fill with staff and priceless art, but in those early years, it was just her and her father. He insisted she learn the business from the ground up. At 15, she was mixing dyes and labeling shampoo bottles in the factory, not just watching from a distance. By the time she was 35, her father was gone too, taken by illness. In 1957, she inherited the L'Oréal fortune, becoming the principal shareholder of a company already selling in 17 countries. Liliane married André Bettencourt in 1950. He was a rising politician, ambitious and well-connected, with a past tied to the shadows of pre-war France. Their marriage brought a daughter, Françoise, but little warmth. André poured his energy into politics and business, often spending Liliane's money for his own ends. Family life revolved around appearances, not affection. The daughter grew up quiet and bookish, more at home with her piano than with her mother. Mother and daughter lived under the same roof, but rarely found comfort in each other. By the 1980s, Liliane's world looked perfect from the outside. An Art Deco mansion, gardens, a staff that kept everything running. She was the richest woman in France, possibly the world. Yet behind the gates she lived in near solitude. Friends were few. She shied away from the press and rarely entertained. The parties she did host felt more like obligations than celebrations. Servants kept their distance. Her daughter remained formal and reserved. Even surrounded by opulence, Liliane was often alone. Wealth insulated her from need, but not from loneliness. The fortune her father built became a barrier, a gilded cage, beautiful but confining. Inheritance brought power, but also isolation. For decades she moved through rooms filled with art and silence, waiting for something or someone to break through. Barnier arrived in Liliane's world in 1987, carrying a camera and an air of confidence that set him apart from the usual faces in her orbit. At 40, he was already a fixture in Parisian society, known for his quick wit, his boldness, and the ease with which he moved among artists, designers, and the very rich. Barnier had a reputation for making himself unforgettable. In the past, he had photographed icons, mingled with fashion legends, and built a life around the art of conversation. He was openly gay at a time when that still raised eyebrows in certain circles, but he wore it like a badge, never apologizing, never shrinking back. The first meeting was supposed to be routine, a magazine assignment to photograph the world's richest woman in her own home. But Barnier didn't treat Liliane like a porcelain doll or a business trophy. He took charge of the shoot, directing her with the same authority he might use on a movie set. He told her to change outfits, to move here, to stand there. Servants hovered, unused to anyone giving their employer orders, but Liliane didn't seem to mind. If anything, she seemed entertained, even energized by his irreverence. She'd spent decades surrounded by people who tiptoed around her, careful not to offend, careful not to break the spell of wealth. Bagné swept all that aside in a single afternoon. He talked to her as if she were just another person, not the owner of a fortune or the guardian of a global brand. He joked, he teased, he made her laugh. There was no agenda she could see, no request for money, no flattery, just a kind of playful challenge. For Liliane, it was a shock to the system. Here was someone who saw past the billions and the marble halls, someone who didn't seem to want anything except her company. After the photo shoot, Bagné didn't simply disappear. He kept in touch, sending notes, dropping by with stories and gifts from his travels. He brought with him the energy of a world she'd only glimpsed from behind her gates, a world of artists, writers, and restless souls. To Liliane, it felt like a door opening. The loneliness of her mansion faded, replaced by the anticipation of his next visit. Her family noticed the change, but the meaning of it would only become clear much later. For now, Bagné was just a friend, a bright, unpredictable presence in a life that had grown too quiet. The numbers defy belief. In 2003, Liliane Bettencourt signed over a life insurance policy worth €253 million to François-Marie Bagné. 3 years later, after another hospital stay, she signed a second policy, this time for €262 million. These weren't the impulsive gifts of a grateful friend. Each contract required signatures, notarial witnesses, and the deliberate transfer of assets on a scale most people never see in a lifetime. The paperwork alone would have filled a banker's briefcase. But for Liliane, the sums were only the beginning. Bagné's windfare didn't end with insurance. Over the next several years, Liliane handed over a collection of 11 paintings, works by Picasso, Matisse, Mondrian and Leger, together valued at roughly €20 million. She also gave him a private island in the Seychelles d'Heiress, 670 acres of pristine sand and palm trees. In 2011, a French court ruled that she had been suffering from Alzheimer's disease since at least 2006. That means at least €500 million left her hands after her mind had already begun to fail. The art, the island, the insurance, each transaction chipped away at a lifetime's fortune, often at her most vulnerable moments. For those watching from the outside, the scale was almost too much to take in. For those inside her world, it was the proof they needed that something was terribly wrong. Pascal Bonnefoy knew he was taking a risk every time he pressed record. For a year, he carried a digital recorder hidden under black felt on a serving tray, gliding from the kitchen to the drawing room, capturing conversations that were never meant for public ears. Security checked the mansion for bugs, but never thought to lift the tray. Over 12 months, Bonnefoy collected 21 hours of audio, evidence of confusion, pressure, and the slow unraveling of a fortune. On those tapes, Liliane Bettencourt can be heard struggling to remember the gifts she'd given. She asks about the island she signed over to Bagné, then complains about the mosquitoes and sharks. At times, she seems lost in her own home, unable to recall what she'd promised or why. Bagné's voice is persistent, coaxing, sometimes impatient. He asks for more, another painting, another favor, another signature. The boundary between friendship and extraction disappears. The worst of it comes when Liliane discusses her will. In one recording, she names Banier as her sole heir, excluding her daughter from everything but the L'Oreal shares. It's not just the money, it's the erasure of family, the rewriting of legacy, while her mind falters. The tapes landed in the hands of prosecutors. In court, the evidence was impossible to ignore. The prosecutor described Banier as a spider spinning his web, then used a single word that would echo through headlines: vampire. She became his thing. He dealt with her like a vampire. The verdict arrived in 2015. Banier was convicted of abuse of weakness and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, plus 158 million euros in damages. But the sentence was suspended. The damages were cancelled. Banier walked out of court a free man. Not a single day in prison. For Liliane, the outcome was different. The court placed her under guardianship, stripping away what little independence remained. The proof was there, but justice had slipped away. Every year, financial exploitation of elders costs families over $36 billion. Most cases never make headlines. Liliane's fortune offered no shield against trust betrayed. As populations age, protection is everyone's business. Wealth may buy privacy, but vigilance, yours and mine, is what truly guards dignity. What safeguards matter most to you?